Hi, everyone. Professor Philip Travis here, here at EOU, History of Modern Russia, History 448. It is week 4. This week, it's a pretty involved week. We do have quite a bit of reading this week, and we do have a quiz this week. So first of all, our reading for this week comes from Service, our main textbook, chapter 9 and 11. And then there are two supplemental readings posted for you in modules in PDF form. I think you will find these supplemental readings very interesting because they are uniquely about the experience of the Russian peasant under Joseph Stalin, and particularly under Joseph Stalin's collectivization of agriculture programs, as well as Stalin's um, um, exiling of many peasants to Siberia during his rule. So this week we are going to be looking at the rise of Joseph Stalin, and we are going to be examining the policies of Joseph Stalin and how they affected the Russian people. So I think that you will find the supplemental reading very interesting as they deal with the life and experiences of Russian peasants who faced massive changes, quite tragic and catastrophic changes under Joseph Stalin's programs of forced industrialization and collectivization of agriculture. There's a quiz this week. The quiz will be on Service Chapter 9, 11, and on the supplemental readings. Because that's a lot of material, I am going to give you a significant time limit on the quiz. So I'll probably give you upwards of 40 minutes on the quiz because I do understand that that's a lot of material. But I do want to be sure that we're reading this material and that we're understanding it beyond what we're doing in the discussion forum. So read those pages and use a highlighter when you read them so that you can kind of highlight main key ideas that will help you succeed on the quiz. The quiz comes from our reading this week, chapter 9 and 11 from Service, and our supplemental readings on the peasant experiences under Joseph Stalin. And I'll give you extended time on that because I don't want you to run out of time. I want you to be able to go through the material, read the material, comprehend the material. So I'll give you between 40 and 50 minutes. I haven't decided yet on the exact, but should be plenty of time as long as you do the reading in advance. Again, we are looking at the rise of Joseph Stalin this week. I have a recorded lecture provided for you on this topic in modules as always. Let's see. Oh, also remember next week we will have our project proposals coming, our paper proposals coming. And so I have material posted. Actually, this past week there were materials posted in there pertaining to the paper project and the proposal, and I will have those items again in this week's module. Remember, the proposal is not simply select a thesis. This is what I'm doing. It is not just a thesis selection. The proposal needs to have a list of at least 5 academic sources that you think will be useful. It needs to have a potential thesis as well as topic, and I'd like you to take a shot at writing the introduction of your paper. And the introduction for a paper like this should have a narrative hook. So it should open with a narrative hook, which is a kind of catchy first-hand account that sort of draws the reader into the topic by giving them a visual, if you will, of the experience of the historical subjects that you will be, or the historical subject that you will be dealing with in your paper. And then the second paragraph is your argument paragraph, where you explain, what is the argument of this paper? Why is this significant? Why is this worth doing? How does it contribute? These types of things. And I'd like you to take a shot at that in the proposal. Now, the proposal is not due till week 5, but I want you to be thinking about it now because it will just help you that much more the earlier you are thinking about this. Okay, factoid for this week. The factoid for this week I think you'll find pretty interesting. So, I imagine that most everyone is aware of the story of Spartacus. Spartacus, the Roman slave who led the revolt in 73 to 71 BCE against his Roman slave owners, masters. The Spartacus slave revolt is one of the most. There's been multiple movies made about this in the 20th and 21st century. The last movie that was made about Spartacus, I believe, was like about 10 years ago. I remember the commercial, actually. There was a Pepsi commercial. I am Spartacus. I remember that commercial. But Spartacus, the story of this revolt led by the slave Spartacus in Roman times, is arguably the most well thought about aspect of the Roman world of antiquity, next to maybe Caesar. Well, here's the interesting factoid about this. The remembering of Spartacus, which is highly difficult because there's not a lot of really firsthand direct accounts from that exact time to begin with. But in Western history, up until about the 1800s, Western civilization didn't really think about Spartacus at all. Spartacus wasn't really in the sort of, lack of a better way of saying it, in the pop culture mentality like it is today. And Spartacus, and this is where we connect up with our subject, Spartacus's emergence into sort of popular thinking during the 1800s and the 1900s was due to a large part as a result of the writing of leftist scholars, starting with Karl Marx. Then, of course, Lenin discussed Spartacus, and this ultimately led, of course, to the first film of Spartacus, which was produced and done by a leftist film producer. And the idea there was that Spartacus, for communists, represented sort of the lowly oppressed individual who was brave and courageous and willing to resist against the exploitive power of, for the modern sense, the capitalist overlords. And so the factoid is that Spartacus, this sort of famous story that has been told and retold in the Cold War period, it was again retold by a anti-communist perspective that was directly sort of meant to sort of refute the sort of leftist, undertones in the Spartacus narrative in the early 20th century. So the factoid is that even though it's from a Roman revolt in 73 to 71 BCE, the Spartacus slave revolt sort of emerged in the modern world largely as a result of artistic retelling of it to a large extent by communist and leftist thinkers in the 1800s and the 1900s. And so the factoid is Spartacus is a narrative that was sort of used by communists either in Russia or sympathetic to communism, ultimately associated in Russia, that it was actually leftist thinkers that played a large role in the popularization of the Spartacus narrative in modern society. An artistic narrative, by the way, with of course undertones that are very much the creation of the modern era and not something that is relevant to that particular event, of which and of Spartacus we can know very little in terms of concrete understanding. So the factoid is the Spartacus narrative. The Spartacus narrative was, at least to a significant degree, sort of put forth there into the world largely by leftist and communist sympathizing thinkers, including Lenin and, of course, the individual who wrote and directed the first of the Spartacus films. Send me that factoid no later than Wednesday by midnight. Let's have a great week. And let me know if you have any questions, particularly about the paper. Let me know if you have any questions. If anything's not clear in there, let's have a great week, and I'll see you in the discussion forum.